Hi everyone, my name is Becca and we are the Replicators. In this presentation, you will hear from myself, Carrie Ann, Taylor, Noma, and Chelsea. We are excited to share our behavior change project with you, so let's get started. Our behavior change study we chose to replicate for our behavior change project was a study conducted by Spieler and Miltenberger in 2016. Their study examined the effect of awareness training on nervous habits during public speaking. Nervous habits that were targeted for decrease within their study included filled pauses. Examples of this include or tongue clicks, and inappropriate use of the word like. Spieler and Miltenberger utilized a multiple baseline design across participants in which 4 students attending the University of South Florida, located in Tampa, Florida, participated in their study. Overall, their study not only showed a decrease in the frequency of target behavior, but also showed improvement in each participant's overall public speaking abilities. So what is awareness training? Spieler and Miltenberger indicate that awareness training is just that, making the client or participant aware of the behaviors and the environments or situations that they typically occur in. A lot of us can probably relate to nervousness and fear in public speaking. Statistics show that 40% of people rank public speaking as one of their top 3 fears, often ranked more fearful than death. With the expectation to possess strong public communication skills to succeed in both the academic and professional environment in today's society, anxiety and fear related to public speaking has become increasingly prevalent. Studies show that many blame their fear for public speaking on their own self-perception of voice intonation. Others also admit that they fear appearing unintelligent during public speaking, which contributes to their anxiety and nervousness towards such performances. While anxiety and nervous habits can range from minimal to extreme and can take place in many different situations in people's lives, evidence shows that several harmful effects can be attributed to nervous habits. Associations with distress, scarring, or other tissue damage, speech problems, and interference with adaptive or vocational performance have been reported in relation to nervous habits. So with the increasing prevalence of anxiety and nervous habits in relation to fear of public speaking, research has studied various techniques and strategies to help individuals overcome this challenge. Hindo and associates conducted a study using an exposure-based treatment technique where participants in this study were exposed to several small public speaking activities. Results showed that nervous habits and anxiety related to public speaking significantly decreased following treatment. In another study, attentional control abilities were examined in relation to fear of public speaking. Attentional control abilities are indicated as the ability to focus on objects or tasks and the ability to shift focus to an additional task or focus on another task simultaneously, or multitasking. Participants who self-reported attentional control abilities presented less nervous habit behavior during their public speaking performance in comparison to those who reported low attentional control abilities. Another technique that has been researched and studied in relation to nervous habits during public speaking is habit reversal techniques. Habit reversal techniques are similar to awareness training, in which awareness training is actually a component within habit reversal strategies. So in addition to awareness training in habit reversal, another component known as competing response training is also implemented. Competing response training is similar to differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors, or DRI, in which a client or participant is taught a specific behavior that is incompatible with the target behavior. Results from habit reversal studies show that by combining both of these components, nervous habits related to public speaking were reduced significantly. While each of these studies have proven to be effective in reducing nervous habits in public speaking, Spieler and Miltenberger wanted to examine the effectiveness of awareness training alone for decreasing nervous habits in public speaking. Awareness training has been applied to a variety of other behaviors as an effective intervention. Christeller and Wolliver conducted a study in which various components of awareness training were used along with other theoretical principles and concepts to bring self-awareness to the complexity of binge eating disorder. In addition to self-awareness training, mindfulness meditation, mindful eating, and acceptance principles were applied to treat participants suffering from binge eating disorder. Each component involved in the eating awareness training were shown to be successful in reducing the binge eating within participants. Research has also shown that awareness training is an intervention that can be applied to many concerning behaviors and challenges faced by people from all walks of life. Next, Carrie Ann will discuss our methods in replicating Spieler and Miltenberger's study of using awareness training to decrease nervous habits during public speaking.
Thank you, Becca. The first thing I will be discussing today is the way we were able to modify the original study's method of organizing their participants and mediator. In the original study, they utilized 1 mediator and 4 participants, but to ensure everyone in our group had the opportunity to both provide and take data, we created a system which allowed everyone a chance. The first participant being Becca, I was her mediator. Participant 2 was myself, Taylor was my mediator. Participant 3 was Taylor, her mediator was Noma. The 4th participant was Noma, her mediator was Chelsea, and finally Chelsea was the 5th participant with Becca as her mediator. In the original study, participants were fortunate enough to give their speeches directly to the mediator in person. However, due to the circumstances and where we're located in the US, this was not possible. So we did the next best thing, we Skyped. The materials we utilized during this replication study were a computer, a video recording application, which was Skype, Microsoft Excel, a behavior recording form, writing utensil, a blank white sheet of paper, a blank red sheet of paper, 1 small note card, and a stopwatch or timer. To keep our study the same as the one we replicated, we identified the 3 same behaviors of concern, which, as Becca mentioned earlier, were filled pauses, tongue clicks, and inappropriate uses of the word like. Filled pauses can be defined as any instance an individual makes a speech sound with no semantic meaning in the sentence. An example of a filled pause would be or a. A non-example would be a clearing of the throat. Tongue clicks can be defined as the emission of a click sound with one's tongue that can be heard at least 3 meters away. An example of tongue clicks are making a click sound with your tongue and the roof of your mouth. A non-example would be a tisk sound. Finally, the last behavior was the use of the word like. This can be defined as any instance the word like is being used without following any semantics. An example of this would be, I had like 3 slices of pizza. A non-example would be, we need to use a tool, like a hammer. Our group utilized the method of frequency data collection. Data was collected and recorded at any point the participant displayed a target behavior within her speech. Frequency data collection was the most beneficial type of data collection because it was very easy to implement while also performing other tasks, such as listening to the speech being given. For our study, multiple baseline design across participants was utilized. This design was replicated from that of the original study, in which participants measured their behaviors both before intervention and after intervention. In order to take baseline data, we completed a number of steps. First, participants were given a choice by the mediator between 2 topics to speak about. That can be, some examples of those were my first job or my favorite vacation. Next, participants then chose their topic to make a 3-minute speech about. The mediator then explains to the participants that she will set the timer for 10 minutes. During this time, participants may make and organize notes on a single note card with brief speaking notes or bullet points, which was allowed to be utilized during the final speech. Next, when the participant is finished organizing their notes and/or if the timer went off, the mediator instructs the participant to utilize their computer and deliver her speech through Skype. Located via recorded web chat, the individual mediator and the individual presenter, who were paired at an earlier time, will be the only individuals present for the speech. The mediator will provide a verbal countdown to the beginning of the participant's speech. 3, 2, 1, start. When the mediator says start, they will simultaneously set a 3-minute timer to indicate the duration of the speech as well as record the speech. When 1 minute remains, the mediator will hold up a blank white sheet of paper to indicate time is running out. When the 3 minutes has elapsed and the timer goes off, the mediator will hold up a blank red sheet of paper. The mediator will provide verbal prompting for the participant to continue speaking if speech is discontinued for 15 seconds or if the participant attempts to terminate the speech before the 3 minutes has elapsed. The mediator will maintain a natural affect and facial expressions during the speech and will not provide any feedback to the participants following the baseline speech. These steps will be repeated until all participants have provided their baseline speech to their assigned mediator. To ensure we have received an appropriate amount of data to establish baseline, each participant presented their speech to their mediator about 3 to 6 times. Next, you will hear from Taylor regarding the treatment phase of the replicated study.
Hello, I'm Taylor. So discuss the unique target behaviors that they saw with each participant. So this looked like a visual representation using the recorded videos, and they were shown to the participant to help aid in identifying and describe each target behavior to help the participant detect their own behaviors. After the discussion, the participant had to pick another topic from the list to conduct their new speech, and they were given 10 minutes to do so. For the awareness training, each participant was instructed to raise target behavior. Target behaviors were detected 100% accuracy in one session or 90% accuracy in 2 sessions. Awareness training was either terminated once the criterion was met, or if there were a failure to improve significantly in identifying the occurrences of the target behavior. And the next phase in treatment was the post-awareness training assessment. This phase, procedures were followed from the baseline phase. The participants again chose a different topic from the list that they haven't used already and were given 10 minutes to prepare their notes. During the speech, the mediator maintained a neutral effect and did not provide feedback or visual cues when occurrence of the target behavior occurred. Decreased by 80% during the first post-awareness, which followed the same protocol as the training phase. Awareness training phase. For our group, we were implementers sessions as each participants. Once the post-awareness training generate each participant.
We are having some technical difficulties.
All right. Where was the last thing you guys heard? All right, cool. All right, so during the awareness training, the mediator as well as the participant had to raise their right hand when detecting the targeted behavior, but only for the first 5 was the mediator supposed to raise their right hand to detect the problem behaviors. After unless the participant was unable to detect their own behavior within 2 seconds. While in this phase, participants were required to deliver their speeches consecutively on the same topic until the target behaviors were detected with 100% accuracy in one session or with 90% accuracy in 2 sessions. Awareness training was either terminated once the criterion was met or if there were failure to improve significantly in identifying the occurrences of the target behaviors. And the next phase in treatment was the post-awareness training assessment. In this phase, the same procedures were followed from the baseline phase. The participants chose a different topic from the list that they haven't already used and were given 10 minutes to prepare speaking notes as they did in baseline. During the speech, the meter maintained a neutral effect and did not provide feedback or visual cues when the occurrence of target behaviors occurred. As indicated in the original study, if the participants' data did not decrease by 80% during the first post-awareness, each participant was required to complete a booster awareness session, which followed the same protocol as the awareness training phase. Our group was not required to implement the booster sessions since our data did decrease by at least 80% during the post-awareness training phase. Once the post-awareness training phase was completed, a single generality probe was conducted for each participant. During the generality probe, each participant chose another topic to speak on from the sample topics that we have not done yet. This speech followed the similar procedures from the baseline phase, except in this phase, each of the audience during the sessions phase, participants should assign and for IOA was using our sorry about that. All right, for IOA, our IOA was measured using our video recorded sessions. During each phase, participants sent their video recorded sessions to their assigned fellow group member. So it's back to Carrie Ann. Carrie Ann to me. Me to know Noma to check up. So I really care. Our IOA data was at 95% agreement across participant phases. IOA was collected using the mean count interval IOA, in which the smaller number of recorded observations was divided by the larger number of recorded observations to the decimal. So by looking at our table, it was taken every session was then divided and then all added up and then divided by the total number of intervals that we had, and then it was all multiplied by 100. And that gave us our IOA percentage.
I think Taylor's having some technical difficulties. I could just review the treatment fidelity real quick.
Treatment fidelity.
What do you think?
For our treatment fidelity.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I would have someone else do it because it's not able to be understood. And I also, this is a recording that your classmates are going to see too. So I would have someone else take over.
Okay. So treatment fidelity showed 100% across each participant and phase during our replication study. Treatment fidelity was calculated by utilizing similar checklists to that provided by the original study through each phase. Following each phase, previously assigned pairings of group members watched video recorded sessions and completed the checklist. Treatment fidelity was scored by calculating the number of steps scored yes by assigning group members on the checklist. The number of items scored yes was divided by the total number of implementation steps for each list, which yielded the treatment fidelity percentage. Items scored not applicable on the checklist was not included in the total number of implementation steps. So again, you could see treatment fidelity was calculated by number of scored yeses over the total number of implementation steps. And I believe next we have Noma with the results.
Hi, I'm Noma and I'll be reporting on the result of our study. This replication study focused on examining the effectiveness of awareness training on nervous habits of individuals during public speaking. We originally hypothesized that the awareness training would decrease the nervous habits during public speaking, and our replication study confirmed it. Like Karian had mentioned in the previous slides, we used multiple baseline across participants because it was most relevant due to the nature of our study. Overall, our data indicated that the baseline frequencies of nervous habits for all of the participants were high. And once the treatment was implemented, the frequency of targeted behavior decreased. In the following slides, I'll be talking in details about the actual results of each individuals. So first up, we have Carrie-Ann's, and I will be mentioning her overall outcome of the study for her portion. Carrie-Ann's nervous habits during public speaking, her baseline data ranged from 16 to 36 counts of nervous habits. Once awareness training was implemented, the data ranged from 0 to 12 frequencies, and during generalization phase, there was only one occurrence of nervous habits. Overall, it indicates that there is decrease in nervous habits during public speaking once treatment was implemented. Our second participant was Chelsea. Her baseline data of nervous habits was from 24 to 40 frequencies. Once the implementation of awareness training, which significantly helped decrease the frequency count, eventually ranged from 0 to 2 counts. And additionally, generalization data also indicates that the nervous habits did not occur for Chelsea, demonstrating that awareness training is in fact effective for her also. Our third participant is Becca, and her baseline ranged from 24 to 31 counts of nervous habits. And once awareness training was implemented, it dropped significantly. Then her frequency ranged from 0 to 3 counts. Generalization data indicates that the frequencies of nervous habits were 1. Comparing to the baseline phase, even though she had 1 count of nervous habits during the generalization phase, overall, her result indicates that awareness training was in fact effective for reducing nervous habits during public speaking. Our fourth participant was Taylor, and her baseline data ranged from 9 to 18 nervous habits during public speaking. For her, once the awareness training was implemented, her frequency counts also dropped between 3 to 13 for post-awareness training. Generalization data for her also indicates that the instances of nervous habits did not occur at all. And despite the length of awareness training phase, treatment does show effectiveness in reducing nervous habits during public speaking for her as well. Lastly, my baseline data ranged between 10 to 20 frequencies. Once awareness training was implemented, the frequency of targeted behavior definitely dropped. The numbers were from 3 to 9. Post-awareness training, the data ranged from 0 to 4 counts of nervous habits, and during the generalization phase, there was no instance of nervous habits for me, or it was observed. And based on the accumulated data, the result indicates that the generalization of the training for decreasing these specific behaviors were notable. This is our multiple baseline data for or graph for all of the participants across phases, and based on the data accumulated, the result definitely indicates that the frequency counts decreased once intervention was implemented, and it also shows that there is a functional relationship between dependent variable, which is nervous habits during public speaking, and independent variable, which is awareness training. Next, I will let Chelsea discuss about the recommendation and limitation of our study.
Okay, so for the discussion, our conclusion was that this was an absolute success in terms of decreasing the frequency of nervous habits during public speaking. It was clear across the board that each person's habits decreased substantially, and through the generality probe, they were almost non-existent. The treatment definitely proved to be a successful method. Each participant engaged in high rates of at least one of the nervous habit behaviors, whether that was saying like, or saying or making clicking noises with your tongue. And each of those substantially decreased during or after the awareness training. The amount, like I said, was substantial for everybody. At times during baseline, it was about even 40 counts in frequency, and so to decrease down to, I think it was 10 at the most, is pretty significant. The reduction was immediate for most participants during even the awareness training, and during post-awareness training, the frequency remained at those low levels. In a generality probe, all participants engaged in fewer than 3 behaviors at the most, which further solidifies the efficacy of our implemented treatment method. There were a few limitations, of course, the first being a lack of blind observers. This could have led to a bias in the way that we responded to the participants when we were observing. So I think that if we'd been able to involve more people in the study and have people that were simply observers and people that were simply participants, we would have been able to manipulate the observers in such a way that they would have been blind, at least for the baseline, I think. And they would have just known that they were there to collect data on these specific behaviors. The second limitation was testing. Because of the high amount of baseline for some participants, there were, I think the least amount of baseline for one of our participants was 3 sessions, but the most was 6 or 7. That, I think, could have led to the threat of testing, which in any study that requires you to respond to the same test repeatedly, like we did, we had to give the same speech repeatedly for baseline. there's just a likelihood that it can result in a behavior change, whether that is increasing or decreasing the behavior. So it's just really something to keep in mind. There was some variation in NOMA's baseline and in Taylor's baseline, where Taylor's was increasing a bit and NOMA's it did level out and trend, but there was a bit of variation. So I think that possibly it was because of the amount of baseline that we had to do. In spite of that, the frequency was still higher compared to the intervention phase and the post-intervention phase, so we still did manage to find a trend in that data and to successfully decrease those behaviors. The multiple treatment interference limitation, I think the duality of having each participant double as not only a participant but an observer could have acted as multiple treatment interference, I'm sorry. So if a participant were to have acted as an observer first, or even if they had to go from doing their baseline to then turning around and doing observation for somebody else, that definitely brings that awareness to that behavior. And I think it definitely could have had an effect, because you get into this mindset as an observer of, I want to decrease this behavior. But as a participant, you have to put that out of your mind and just focus on letting the behavior be as natural as possible. And if you engage in it, you engage in it. That's just how that is supposed to be. So I think that we could have engaged in even higher levels of nervous habits if we had simply been participants and not observers as well. And the last limitation was the Hawthorne effect. So, and I think this is a really important concept to remember. This refers to the participants' observed behavior not being representative of the natural behavior due to their knowledge that they are being watched, that they're in an experiment. And of course, there was no way around that for this experiment. We knew that we were being watched, not only by an observer, but it was also for a project. And that could have had an effect on the genuine levels of the nervous habits. I know that some of the members became a little bit more nervous during the recording as opposed to before recording when we were going over protocol. But I think we still managed to show that we had gained experimental control. And I do think that a true research study might have had different levels of frequency, if only slightly. But compared to the original study, our numbers were similar. So I don't think it had too much of an effect, but it is just something to keep in mind. Our recommendations for future researchers. Obviously, other researchers should replicate what we've done. That's very important to prove the reliability and the validity of a study. And there may be chances to expand the awareness training or introduce a new method of intervention, such as priming before giving a speech, something like that. And I think that increasing sample size could definitely bolster the results. If there are more studies, then we can generalize the treatment to other individuals and perhaps eventually even to populations as well. So it was a very interesting study, especially since we as graduate students are so similar to the original participants. They were all graduate students as well, except for one of them, and giving speeches and everything. It's a very relevant study to us. So it was definitely fun to do, and I think we did it successfully.
Awesome. Can you see me?